I just appreciate everybody watching.
Watch him throw the ball. We gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through 4th and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders, heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on, keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive. This is Trap or Dive.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to another episode of Trap or Dive podcast, provided to you by 214 Media and SB Nation's Hogs Haven. I got AJ and Dre in here with me. Fellas, good morning, man. Welcome to the weekend. How y'all feeling, bro? Y'all all right?
I'm not much of a morning person, Jamal. I don't know if you know that yet.
Hey, look, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day. So I think about that. I've been up for 5 hours.
Oh, yeah. I get your text, but I'll be like, dang, Jamal wakes up early.
Yeah, bro. I'll be up, man. I'll be up. AJ, what's going on with you, player?
Hey, nothing much, man. Just trying to stay away from this bad air quality that we have.
So about that, right quick before we introduce our guests, how bad is it? Because like for me, as y'all know, I'm in a boot. I ain't really doing much walking outside, but is it like noticeably bad, or is you just trying to stay away from it?
I mean, you can see it in the air, but
yeah,
I'm not even trying to be a test dummy for it. So I've kind of just been staying low.
I seen fools playing sports outside yesterday.
Yeah, God bless.
I was driving around running some errands, and I'm seeing people smoking cigarettes outside, people at restaurants dining outdoors. I'm like, man, I don't know, something. These people must not watch the news, have cell phones, or something,
or just don't care, bro. Like that actually makes me think about my flag game on Sunday. Well, I'm not playing, but I'm gonna pull up. But it makes me think, like, are we really gonna play? Now that I think about it, but you know, sometimes they janky, so they don't really they don't care what the weather looking like. But speaking of weather conditions, somebody who was actually out there a couple of days ago in this type of a couple of days ago in Ashburn in these conditions before they moved it inside on Thursday is ESPN's John Keim. John Keim is joining us. He is the host as well of the John Keim podcast. John, man, I appreciate you joining us this morning. How you feeling?
Of course, man. I'm doing all right. And by the way, I get up as early as you do.
Look, what's going on? Are you writing? Are you meditating? Are you doing a bike? What's because I know you have a trail that you going. You mentioned.
It just depends on. Sometimes you're up not because you want to be. So it's not like you're always wide awake at 4:30 or 5. Sometimes what I'm doing is finishing the shows I fell asleep to the night before. So that's kind of a big thing too. So, you know, or sometimes like the other thing is the nice thing is like the NBA games, they replay them early in the morning. Sometimes you watch them then. So, you know, and you can fast forward.
That's actually smart.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great.
I feel like when I miss them the night before, like if I'm up at 4:30, I'm usually like I'm in bed by like 10. I ain't gonna lie to you. But if I miss it, I'll just catch the highlights. But that makes sense.
No, but you can watch like there's some games I've done that a couple of times where like, okay, you know what happened, but you want to see how it happened. So there you go.
So
sometimes like, during the season, it's going to be watching games again and stuff, you know, starting at a certain time. So
John, what time do you go to sleep? If you're
go to sleep or fall asleep because you know, and it depends. Like, I can fall asleep on the couch with the best of them, and it could be around 9 o'clock for a little bit, and then you wake up, and then you're up till about midnight. So, there are a lot of times I'm not in bed until about midnight, and then you get up early. So, but like I kind of count that 45 minutes that I fall asleep on the couch while we're, you know. So unless there's a game on, then it's harder to fall asleep.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, John, you've been around the Commanders since we're talking about these guys. You've been around the Commanders the last 3 days, and obviously you've attended some of the earlier sessions, the offseason practices as well, prior to mandatory mini camps. But in terms of the last 3 days, what have been like some of your main takeaways when you when you've been out there observing both sides of the football, the coaches, things like that? What's some of your main takeaways from the mandatory minicamp?
Well, so when you bring up coaches, I'll start there, because if it was just going to be the players, there are a couple of different areas that jump out. But the coaching with Eric Bieniemy, he's the one that you notice the most, because it's a big change to have a coordinator who here is as demanding as he is. And I think that was necessary. And I think you see it. And just like if he got on, and I talked about this in the podcast, but like Jahan Dotson the other day ran around, it's just on air, or just, you have a coach as a defender. So you're really just kind of going over what you're going to do later in practice. But he ran, and it was about a little more than 3/4 speed, but Bieniemy's like, we're not here to half-ass it, go again. So it's like little things like that. And I like that because, this team hasn't won anything in a while. And when you don't win anything in a while, you're going to get, some demands and accountability put on you. And I don't think these guys mind that at all. But I think that's I think there's an adherence to details that he has. And I think there's, you can see I think you can see some of his ways of getting guys the ball, how you're going to use Antonio Gibson this year, the tight end usage. I think all those things are what you see right now from him. So I think that's why I have to start there, because I think he was, for everybody who talks about the offense, like, oh, you didn't do enough here. That's the biggest move is Eric Bieniemy. And I don't even know what kind of play caller he's going to be, but I do think they're going to be prepared. And I think if they're not adhering to the details, he's going to let them know. And the nice thing for him is he starts off his career coaching in Minnesota, and he's getting on Adrian Peterson. If he's going to get on Adrian Peterson, there's not a dude on this roster he's going to back off from. So I like all that. But again, it's not just that he yells and all that, because we've all been around coaches who just yell for the sake of yelling because you think it's tough. There's a purpose behind what he says. And there's when he's telling you to run it again, it's because he's annoyed that you didn't run it right the first time. There was a play the other day in practice where Antonio Gibson on a screen was, I think, either just beyond the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage. He made him run it again because he wants you behind the line of scrimmage. And there's an annoyance in his voice, basically we've gone over, that kind of annoyance. So he runs it in practice. He runs it, and again, just on air, runs it, does it well. They run it in practice, and it probably would have been it may have been a touchdown in the game, for 60 or 70 yards. It was that well executed. And it wasn't just because Gibson was now a yard behind the line of scrimmage. It's more the attention to details of the play. And so I start there with him. And I think there's reason to feel good about what he can add here and the energy that he brings and all that. Now, again, we don't know what kind of play caller he's going to be, but I like everything else so far, because I think everything else, that all matters. And you guys know, everybody's got a certain set of plays that you can run against a cover 2 beater, you got split safeties. How are you going to beat that? A lot of those players are the same, but the details of the job, I think, are what separate eventually. And that's what he's really strict on. So I start there. And then I think the other things that jump out, the tight end usage, I think that's going to be a big deal. I think Logan Thomas looks like Logan Thomas, where he's a guy that can use his size. I think the way they're going to use these guys is very different from the last couple of years in terms of in the red zone, finding them again. But they've been very present in the practices we've seen. That's a big thing. I think the secondary, those young guys, Emmanuel, Forbes, Quan Martin, have had good springs. I think Forbes will go through some learning curves because he is aggressive, and there are going to be things that are going to test him on. But I like the way he's adjusted to certain things already. I think he and Quan Martin are smart corners. I think you already have two other smart corners as far as the top guys in Fuller and Benjamin St. Juste. So I like what they have shown. And I think Sam Howell he's shown progress. I think, you can still say, where is he going to go? I don't know. I like that they have Jacoby Brissett here. I think he's a great insurance policy if Howell doesn't progress. But there are things that Howell shows. You say, okay, you can build on that. So there are things that you can build on. Now they just have to go do it. So there are concerns, though. There are concerns about some aspects of this team.
John, let me ask you, have you had the opportunity to ask some of these defensive players, whether it be on the front side or back end, how it's been going against this Eric Bieniemy offense that he's leading? And I guess the second question would be, do we know yet if Eric Bieniemy is going to be calling plays on the sideline or in the booth?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that the answer to that one yet. And it's funny because it's always a feel thing. And I think when you're in Kansas City, if you have Patrick Mahomes, you can call it wherever you want, right? Because Mahomes will just do something. But it just depends on the preference. And I don't know the answer to that question. As far as going against them, a lot of what we've heard so far was more the energy in practice that comes because of him. That was something that some of the defensive guys talked about. But this is a defense this is an offense that these guys have faced on defense against some teams. So it's not like it's a unique offense, but it is different than what they face. So haven't gotten into great detail about, what is, and I think that's something as much for training camp as we get closer to the season, some things that they see that maybe that it's like, hey, this is going to be a problem because of this. I haven't gotten to those kind of detailed questions just yet, because a lot of it is talking to the offensive guys about the difference in not just the style of offense, because again, there's a crossover between what they're doing with, there's some similarities with what they're doing now versus what they did before, but there are some definite differences. I think, again, the screen game is one of them, the usage of the tight ends, how they're going to get some of the playmakers the ball, like Antonio Gibson, how they're going to move them around and get them the ball. And and the big thing is get the playmakers the ball in space. And everybody wants to do that, of course. So, but how are you going to get there? So no, I haven't had that level of depth or that level of detailed questions with them yet. But as we progress, that will be the case. Because right now it's more talking to the offensive guys about some of that more than anything else at this point.
And John, I just wanted to ask, with a lot of the conversation on Sam Howell, have you noticed any kind of a connection that he's developing with any specific wide receivers so far through the OTAs and minicamp? And the second part to this question, because obviously he played in North Carolina with this guy, Dyami Brown. Dyami's name was mentioned in like trade talks earlier, like pre-draft. What is kind of the thought process with the team now on him? Is he kind of on thin ice with the team? I mean, does he have to prove himself?
There were no trade. They weren't going to trade him. There was no, that talk was not coming from them. I don't remember. I remember that there was somebody put that out there, but that was not coming from them for a couple of reasons. One, he didn't really have any value, but they also didn't have a lot of depth at the position beyond the top three guys who could be pretty good. And the feeling has been that they think that this is a good fit for him, this system. And some of it's the slants, but some of using the speed and getting him down the field a little bit more with the quarterback who can consistently get it down the field, who also happens to know him pretty well. So, I think, there was never really any concerted thing to trade him. Now, I would always say this. Somebody gives you a crazy offer, you're always going to listen. They're going to listen to everybody, every single player on the team. If you call up and say, we'll give you this for this guy, you're going to listen. I don't care who it is. If they call up and said, we'll give you 3 first-round picks for Terry McLaurin, you think they're going to say no thanks? I mean, you know what I mean? So everybody at some point would be in that conversation, but there was nothing really strong with that. Anyway, but that's probably the reason. So as far as connection goes, I think the biggest thing is the tight ends. And I know that's not the receivers, but the tight end usage has been heavy. And so that has been a change. Now, my thing is which is great to get the tight ends involved, but when you're getting the tight ends involved, it means the receivers aren't as involved. Those are still your playmakers. And I think that there's a good connection with Sam and a Logan Thomas, and finding him hey, slide, something's not open, slide, get it to Logan over here. And he can make the catch because he uses his size very well. The receivers, there's certainly Jahan Dotson is a guy that you would see that he's looked for a lot. I think I'll be curious to see how it develops with Terry. In the Dallas game, I mean, his first throw and touchdown was to Terry, and he had a deep one to him too. So like, I think there's going to be opportunities for that. But I think in practice, the tight ends have jumped out. And then again, Jahan, he looks for Jahan a lot. And, you know, so, and they're, you know, but that's where we're at right now with that. And Curtis hasn't been out. Curtis wasn't really going in full teamwork the last couple of days. But again, like the hard part is going to be somebody's going to get left out of the shuffle here a little bit, right? Because if you're going to, I tell you, like the tight ends are all, you know, they're using those guys. And they want to get Antonio the ball more. And then they got, you know, these 3 receivers and they got this guy. You can't get them all the ball. And they do want to run the ball. And so that's where I'm going to be curious to see how it actually develops during the season, where where they're looking for, et cetera.
Quick question. Because I guess I wasn't aware that Curtis Samuel wasn't full go. And some of those drills, is this part of their plan again, or is he hurt, or what?
He was going through individuals and stuff. So, and he looked fine warming up. I would say this, like he's gone pretty hard when we've watched him this spring, and you know, I think with him, I think they just want to be careful. You know, they'll call it maintenance days, right? And I think that, and like yesterday, there were a couple other veterans who didn't go as well, or in the team drills, like Kendall Fuller and a couple others. So there's some maintenance to it. And I think with, you know, Curtis, if he's had a good spring, you get to this point, you know, get to training camp.
You had mentioned in your main takeaways, Quan and Emmanuel on the defensive side of the football, and something that AJ brought up to us that I think is a interesting conversation is how the outside cornerbacks and slot cornerback will kind of work moving forward. Obviously, we know how Ron Rivera thinks of Kendall, and he mentioned Benjamin St-Juste if they can get him to stay healthy. But obviously, Quan is somebody who they've looked at as a slot guy too, and somebody who can kind of offload the amount of snaps that Cam Curl sees as the Buffalo nickel role. How do you see the outside cornerback position playing? Because I'm on one side of the fence. AJ can explain his side, but I'm on the side of the fence where I think that if there was a position battle with the cornerbacks, I think Emmanuel already has his slot secured as the outside. But I think in terms of primary 2 corners outside, I think Emmanuel has his spot secured. But then I think on the other end, you're probably looking at something between Benjamin St-Juste and Kendall Fuller rather than it be a slot cornerback battle between Quan Martin and X amount of other players. What do you kind of see that playing out? How do you see the outside cornerbacks in terms of the starters? And how do you see the slot playing out? All those things together.
All right. So the way they've done it this spring is, you know, a lot of times it's would be St-Juste and Fuller on the outside. And then there's a rotation. And then Forbes, of course, is spending a lot of time with the starters as well as an outside guy. Sometimes with St-Juste inside, sometimes it might be St-Juste, Kendall Fuller, and then Rashad Wildgoose inside. And he's done a decent job this spring as well. Now, you know, again, see where it goes. I think ultimately, if you want your 3 best corners on the field, you're going to have you have Forbes and Fuller on the outside. And when you're going to your nickel, Forbes and Fuller on the outside, and you can put St-Juste in the middle. And St-Juste does I thought he did a nice job in there. What really hurt them last year was William Jackson just could not play zone. Yeah. And, you know, and it forced St-Juste to go back outside, but they put him inside there because you go back to like his combine numbers and all that, the 3-cone drill and all that. And his numbers there are really good. So he's got that short area quickness plus the length. And I think they like that length inside as well. Now, I think, you know, St-Juste has some length, and so does Forbes. Forbes is not necessarily really tall, but he has length. And one thing you saw, like, for example, in practice, I can't remember if it was the other day or Wednesday, where there was a slot fade to Jahan Dotson against St-Juste, and he's covering a smaller corner a smaller receiver who's very good, quick and all that. But he prevents the quarterback from getting a good target because, you know, stays inside, has the length and get over there. So you got to throw up and over him, and it's hard. And I think that so they like that stuff inside. You go back to the Bears game, that play he made to seal the win at the goal line was that short area quickness. And so he does a good job there. So I could see him playing inside there in a 3 receiver set or a 3 corner set and the other 2 on the outside. It'll be interesting how they rotate those DBs though, because of, like you talked about, Quan Martin, the versatility. He can play that Buffalo nickel. He can cover the slot when it's, especially a tight end. And I think he understands leverage very well. There was one time where they had 6 DBs on, they had their dime package in there with, so you get a fast set in the backfield. I think he'd be a part of that, but I don't know. Like, it's hard to say because I do know how much they love Forbes, and he's done nothing this spring to suggest that they made a wrong pick. And Martin, I think, looks pretty good. So they're going to find ways to get him on the field. It will be interesting. And I'd say this, like, it's a good problem to have because it means you have some versatility and depth. And what it does do is it allows you to disguise coverages better. I think you have a smart secondary, and I think then it allows you to be a little bit more creative with your packages as well.
And John, I just want to jump in real quick since we were talking about Forbes. I remember a lot of the conversation last year with Jahan Dotson being drafted in the first round around this time of year. We were getting a lot of hype, like this guy might be, special. He was worth the draft pick. Are you kind of getting that sense, or maybe not to the extent of Jahan Dotson's hype was, but are you kind of getting a sense that they are really high on him from what they've seen so far?
Definitely. And I don't, like I said, he's shown nothing in practice than to be that to push him in the other way. It's only been probably increased because of what he's shown. And every day he's getting his hands on the ball, whether it's knocking it away, a couple interceptions. Now the interceptions aren't always against, like, sometimes it's against a Jake Fromm in a 2-on-2 drill, something like that. But it's what he shows to get those picks that I think makes them excited. And there was a play in practice last week that one of the coaches sent me a clip of, like, hey, look at this. And the receiver just, deep out, and he turns Emmanuel around, but he doesn't gain ground on that. And usually, you know how it is, like a receiver turns you around, you're going to get some more separation. Yeah. He did not. And then it's because when you watch Forbes's feet, the transition to get back into it is really, really good. And he drove on the ball, and what should have been a completion was instead a deflection. And like plays like that are like that is just different. And then, I talked about this on my podcast too, but there were a couple plays a couple weeks ago. I can't remember how many weeks ago. One of the first practices we saw against Cole Turner, big guy. He's covering him inside, and Turner bodies him, and he's like, can't do anything about it. Turner's just a big guy. You're not. He's very thin. So Kendall Fuller, and this is why I like Kendall Fuller. Fuller is one of the smarter corners that I've covered. And so he tells Forbes, like, basically use your advantage. Your advantage is your length. Find a way to use that length. Get to a side, play to a side, and reach around and deflect away. So the next time we see him practice, he deflected 2 passes that way. Now, they were not to tight ends, but it was more so taking what the guy told him and applying it in a practice situation, and it worked. And so you started to see some of that. AC, saw that against some tight ends as well. He's going to get bodied at times because, he's a corner. I don't care, even if he was solidly built, a tight end's going to body you. So how do you try to negate that? And that's where I think he'll, use your advantage. You're quick, you have length, use that to your advantage. But he's done nothing to slow down their enthusiasm for him at all.
I got one on my side, one more question for you, John. And it's something that you tweeted. No, I think it was your podcast. You had mentioned you brought up Ricky Stromberg and how the coaches view him, and you had mentioned that like this year, I personally described it as developmental, but I don't think you said that. You more so said that they just view Nick Gates as the starter at center. Right. He's only going to be playing center. And at that point, they just need Ricky Stromberg to sit back essentially for a year and just learn. And so I view it as developmental in a sense. And that's kind of how I took it. But my question and what really bothered me, because I really like Ricky Stromberg, my thing is, if you want your best 5 out there and Nick Gates has experience at center, 2 things: why entertain a left guard, a competition at left guard when Nick Gates has experience playing that guard. But also, if you don't want to do that, which is perfectly fine, it's your prerogative. Ricky Stromberg is good enough to compete for a starting position. He doesn't have to win it, or he may not win it. I should say it like that. He may not win it, but I think like completely closing the book on Ricky Stromberg in year one because you're adamant that Nick Gates will play center for you. I just can't wrap my head around taking Stromberg in the third round and saying we're not even going to entertain giving him a shot to even step on the field. Like,
they haven't said that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I'm rationalizing it. If you really,
I would say,
Nick Gates.
listen, it's clear that Nick Gates is a starter, and but I would say, if he's struggling and Stromberg's doing well, that's where your competition comes in. I think there's always a level of competition, but there are a couple of things. One, they just like Gates more at center, and they put center as a higher position value than left guard. And I think pretty much any line coach would as well, right? So you start there, that the center position is more valuable than a left guard. And they just felt he was simply better as a center than he was as a left guard. But the hard part for me is you did take a guy in the third round. Now you take a guy in the third round, they should be a contributor to your team in year one. And they should ascend to a starter's role within a couple of years. Now, he could still do that. Stromberg could still become your starter, let's say in whether it's next year or the year after. Heck, I think, to be honest, Jamal, I think part of the reason they took him, a big part, is because they've been burned by all those injuries the last couple of years. And they wanted a good, young, solid, sturdy center in case one of their veterans got hurt. I think that's why Stromberg is here. But if all goes well, he doesn't play this year. That's a hard thing for a third round pick. I think and you look at their fourth round pick in Braden Daniels, he ain't going to play this year either. So you got two top 4 round picks who may not play for you at all this year. Now, if Gates gets hurt, now you say, hey, now you got your guy. And that would be good. And I think Stromberg, I don't know what kind of player Stromberg's going to be. I'm not going to warn a guess based on what we saw in the spring. But I know how burned they felt by the position the last couple of years with the injuries. And I do know and I think Gates will be solid for them. I think, I've heard good things about him from like people in New York. But I just think it shows you how much they value that position over left guard. But yeah, I think the hard part for me is you may have had a third and fourth round picks who maybe down the road are starters for you. But this year, you may not get, if all goes well for you, you won't get much from them at all. Now, I don't know what the plan for Stromberg would be on special teams. I don't know if he'll play that at all. But right now, just from scrimmage, if all goes well, you don't get anything from them.
So John, shouldn't we identify that as like drafting malpractice? Because in Stromberg and Brandon Daniels, those are 4-year starters on the collegiate level. Like, what more could they need to develop to the next level? Well, either you got it or you don't at that point.
Well, to a degree, because you never know what kind of coaching they're getting in college, right? And it may not be the same level. And that's what, like with Daniels, you're going to look at traits. And he's a good athlete. However, the technique needs to be polished, definitely. And so you're going to look at that and say, does he have the skill? Well, he does, but he needs a lot of work on his technique. The other thing for him is he better inside or outside? It could well be that I think down the road, he is more of a guard than he is a tackle, and unless he gets stuff cleaned up as a tackle, because otherwise he can shift inside the guard. And that's where his future could be there. And I don't know. I know they're going to try him at tackle first because it's a more valuable position. So if he hits there in a year or so, then, let's say he develops this year and is like, oh my gosh, he's really done this. And, Charles Leno's contract, could you move on from him and put him in there? Or could you put him at right tackle and you could put Wiley as a back at guard? So he gives you options if he can play tackle. But I do think, like I said, I think he needs to get a lot more consistent with his technique. I don't think it's about sometimes you see his hands aren't always in line with his feet, and they've got to be in sync to a degree, right? And you don't always, so he's got to clean that up. So, and then like I said, with Stromberg, we'll see how the year goes, but I mean, ideally one of those guys has to contribute to your team this year. And, could you have done something different? Yeah. But I know, like with the center, I think the last couple of years burned them badly. And I think that's why they went in that direction. Like, is as much an insurance policy, because Gates also has an injury history too. Yeah. So, so that way, do you feel you're covered? And so it may well be that Stromberg plays and contributes. And I'll say this, like if something happens to Gates and Stromberg goes in and he does a really good job, it's like, hey, that was a good pick because it helped you and it allowed you to continue a certain way. Whereas opposed to the last couple of years where, too many centers got hurt, but you throw in certain guys who could not play center or did not help you at all. And, so we'll see. But like, again, if all goes well and if Gates stays healthy, then,
John, I want to appreciate you for stopping by, man. I always appreciate your insight and all that good stuff with the Commanders and the team and things like that. I want to give you the floor to
I have one more question.
Go ahead, shoot.
Oh, go ahead then. Yeah. I know you had one more.
I was going to ask you, with it being June 9th, of course, like the big topic in Washington right now is quarterback and Sam Howell. With it being June 9th and the OTAs and the mini camps that you've been exposed to, seeing how both quarterbacks, Howell and Jacoby Brissett, have maneuvered with Eric Bieniemy, who would you, at this point before training camp, feel comfortable with starting if it were up to you to make the decision?
That's a good question, because I thought you were going to say, who are they feel? And I know they're going to stick with Howell for right now. I would say this. I think
deep breath told me something.
Because we're talking June, I want to see how Howell develops, because I think he's got a skill set that, he's going to be more aggressive than Jacoby. And that can result in some more big plays. How does the decision-making progress throughout training camp? What I know is that Jacoby has looked the first practice we saw Jacoby, I felt like he was not in rhythm, did not have the timing. And I feel like each subsequent practice, he's getting that. And he does not throw the ball. He's not getting picked off. I think Howell takes a few more chances. And that can be good and bad, right? I mean, I remember back when Jason Campbell was here, there were times where, like, I remember when Zorn was here, I think at the midway point, Jason had like 8 touchdowns and no picks. I remember even asking Zorn, like, would you rather he had like 12 touchdowns and 4 picks, because it's probably a more explosive offense maybe, as opposed to just taking care of the ball. But, I also think, AJ, with this team, that Jacoby could do well. And I say that because, like, there are playmakers. I think he does take care of the ball. You have a really good defense, and you don't want to put them in a bad spot all the time. And that's one of the concerns I would have with Howell. But, what I hear from them is they're pleased with it, for the most part, pleased with his decision-making, and that's going to be the key. But he will, he's going to make young guy mistakes. I think this, and I don't think it's hard to say, because you always hear like, oh, the ceiling is higher. Well, I think the ceiling feels higher because we don't know where he can go. Is Jacoby who he is, or was last year with the Browns maybe something that you show like, hey, you put a good because that defense was a problem in Cleveland, not the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And so how would that translate here for him? But, I think knowing what I know right now, I would stick with Howell. But I feel really good having Jacoby as an option. Like, if the kid, and I feel like with Jacoby, if Howell shows like he's just not progressing, I feel like Jacoby's a guy you can plug in. And, there's always like, you want develop chemistry, rhythm, and all that, but he knows how to handle situations well. He knows how to handle going in that kind of situation. So I'd feel comfortable with him, but right now I would stick with Howell because I'm curious where he can go. Yeah. Cause I don't think, like, even though he's thrown some picks, like he'll make some plays and it's just 7-on-7. So you take that for what it's worth. You're not being rushed and all that, but when he's in 7-7, his rhythm is really good. It's just when you get to the full team drill, then you're throwing blitzes at him. Then you're throwing this at him. then it comes down to game planning. How's the offensive line? But, I would stick with him for right now, but I feel good with Jacoby.
Is this a real competition, or are we just being bamboozled?
Real competition. It's not, listen, we know, like, we've seen real competitions where it's like alternating days of first team reps or whatever. This isn't that. This is all about the competition starts with Sam Howell and his own development, because if he's developing, that's where they're going to go. So from that standpoint, that's the competition. So if he starts to slip, then it becomes then it becomes Jacoby and Sam. I think where it helps Sam is that if they had re-signed Taylor Heineke, we're not talking about a possible competition. I think it's more of a threat with Jacoby, because I think he's better than what Taylor was, and in this role. And so I think because of that, I think it gives you, if you're Sam, you have to really be sharp, because this guy's going to be. And then I think Taylor offered a lot, but I think Taylor knew like that this guy was going to be more the future than he was. He knew if he came back, it would just be as a backup, period. A spot starter kind of type. But, so from that standpoint, I think there's more of a competition with Jacoby. But if Sam is showing the development they want, then it's just still Sam. But, again, if he's not getting it in the meeting rooms and Jacoby is, you have to notice that. If he's, if there's a guy that just bonds with the players and he's showing this, coaches have to notice that. But this too. Coaches sometimes see what they want to see. And if they have a guy that they want to see win the job, things are going to be framed that way, right? And I think, I don't know that that's being done in this case. I can't say that, because I do think that there's a lot that Sam shows that has been pretty good. So that is enough to build on for me. And I think what he showed in that one game was good. Now there's a lot more than just one game that you need, but I think at least it's like, okay, you take that, plus you take his progress in his footwork, plus you take the decision-making, and he gets rid of the ball quick, and, et cetera. And so I think he does a good job with his reads. And one of the things with Jacoby that I've seen in the spring, sometimes the timing might be a little bit off, because he might stay with the read just a little bit longer. So you get to your second option and it might be closed. And, but with Sam, there may be sometimes that may not have been a ball you could squeeze in. Right. And so how's that going to be in the game? But, so we're not I don't think, AJ, that we're not at this real competition where it's like alternating days of reps. It's Sam has to continue to do well to hold on to the job, because if not, then they're not afraid to put Jacoby in. Like I had somebody tell me a couple weeks ago, like, he said, he didn't say it in these words, but it's my words, don't sleep on Jacoby, because, they feel like he's done a good job too. And I think that Rivera said it in the presser the other day, that they talk about him just about as much as they talk about Sam in those meetings. And I believe that, because I've heard that elsewhere as well.
I just, out of this whole thing though, and I don't understand why nobody has really talked about this, at least
talking about Jake Fromm. You going to Jake Fromm?
No. First off, no. But what really boggles my mind, I guess, and I'm maybe over exaggerating too, but Sam Fortier asked when Jacoby spoke a couple of days ago, I guess, is it important for him to get first team reps? And he said, we'll cross that bridge when we cross that bridge. I only seen the quote. I didn't listen to him like audibly, but I just don't understand. Like, I guess, like, what does that mean? And I don't really know like the full context. Nobody really spoke on that. That feels like he understood that he would get some first team reps.
I don't think that was I don't think he came in thinking he was going to get first team reps, because they've been pretty clear from the offseason to now that Rivera was like, this is the guy going into here as QB1. And I don't think that, I think I took it from Jacoby that if they got to that point, I wasn't quite sure what he was meaning by that either, to be honest. So, but I think it was, thank you. I think it was like, that's but I'm trying to guess. I think it's more like, hey, we get to that point, then I'll worry about it then. But again, that's why I say, I think he's, like you always hear in baseball, he's a professional hitter. And I think that's what Jacoby is. He's a guy that you can put him into situations. That's why they like him, that you can put him into situations where he can go in and do that. And he knows how to handle it. He knows how to, in other words, he can stay prepared and do well because he's always going to be prepared. And I think it starts with that. But I would be, if I were them, you should find ways to get him some reps with that, not to throw it, not to like, get people thinking it's some major competition, but just to, just because like you get a series or two with that. Right. I wasn't quite sure what he meant by that, but you kind of try to read it a little bit, but that's what I took.
As long as I'm not sure.
I think they're waiting for the hard knock cameras to come on in training camp to create the drama instead of beforehand.
Yeah.
So we getting hard. Does that mean we're getting hard knocks? You know that, John?
I don't know that. I know, like I talked about this before, but like I know that some people there would want it because they want to show how the organization has changed. What we don't know is, will the ownership thing be settled by then? We don't know that. Like by the time camp opens, can't say that. I think it's certainly trending a certain way that it will be over, but when? So if it's not over, what's the lure? And then the other question is, if you're HBO and you can go do the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, I mean, why would you come here? Like that could be ratings gold as long as like Aaron Rodgers on board. And I think we all see that Aaron Rodgers seems to like attention. So, but I do think I think this would probably be a backup plan because it's an intriguing place. There's a lot of good, look at the storylines. You have a new owner. So it's this new vibe around it. We all know the fans' feelings about Dan Snyder. But so there's a new energy that comes with that just around the organization, if nothing else. Then you have Rivera in a very critical year. Fourth year, you have other people there in a critical year. And then you have this quarterback in Sam Howell. Who is this guy? Can he really do it? Is he really good? Like from it, and I think, if you're around the
that's
team,
why I think in season will work. I think in season is a perfect candidate.
Yeah. But
in season would be scary.
I need it. Y'all know, AJ, y'all know I need that, man. Last year with the Cardinals, oh my goodness.
Listen, from my perspective, it would add too much work, and we don't need there's been enough on this franchise. But you look at it from an outside perspective, there's a lot of fascination with Sam Howell because really, whereas if you're around them, you know how much they like him, and you know what other players think of him. So it's not to me, it's not a shock that they're going to give this guy a chance to win the job because I know what they have felt about him for more than a year. And so, but I think nationally there's some interest. So I think nationally from a fan, from outside DC or fan base perspective, there's really Sam Howell? Who is this guy? And so does that enough to draw people in on HBO? I don't know. But I do think that would be, there are some intriguing storylines here. And then you throw in you do have some personalities with Chase Young, and you have a really, really good defense. But again, if you're HBO and the Jets say hey, we got Aaron Rodgers and we want him, and we're, they have no choice but do it. But where would you go? I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. They're a Super Bowl contender. They're in New York, and you have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So
doing a swan song, I guess.
But I would like to add too that Eric Bieniemy would be a great storyline as well.
Bieniemy's another one. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, absolutely. He'd be a really good one. Absolutely. And I would say this, if I'm Bieniemy, I absolutely want that because I think when you're around him, he does not come across like the head coach of this team, but he comes across like a head coach, right? In terms of demeanor, in terms of authority or whatever. And Rivera is the head coach of this team. That's not what I'm saying, but I think it would be good for him. If part of the reason is he doesn't interview well, it'd be a hell of an interview for him.
I agree.
So that's a good point.
John, man, I can't thank you enough for the time that you've given us today. I want to give you the floor again, formally. Let the people know where they can find you, read your work. I mean, obviously we know ESPN, but anything that you got going on that you want to plug in, man, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Just John Keim Report podcast, really creative name, wasn't my idea, but it's creative.
It's unique.
It's unique. Yeah, it is unique. I mean, it's the only one. So you got that. And then on Twitter, John_Keim. And on Instagram, I think it's John Keim ESPN. And my light's going to fall. There you go. I just caught it. So there you go. How's that? But what a way to close.
Hey, look, the hand's still good, man. Let's see what you look like on the jug machine.
Well, you know what's funny, because I mean, I used to hit off the judge machine. That's about it. But there was one time a few years ago. So we were going. Now my thing's all darkened. But so there was one time Clinton Portis had kind of stopped talking to us a little bit, and Bram Weinstein was like, "Hey, Clinton, if I catch some balls off the judge machine," or he's like, "How can I get you to talk to you?" I think it was like catch one off the judge machine. So Bram's like, "Okay, I'll go do that." So he went and he got someone. He's like, he was going to train him catching balls off the judge machine. First one he caught broke his finger. So
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. But I never caught footballs off the judge machine. I just hit off it in baseball. So and as a safety, I wasn't catching many balls off the judge machine. I don't even know if we didn't even use that back then in high school. So
yeah, I never had a chance to use them. Oh my
God. What I would like to do one time is just try to feel the punt, like from Tress Way, when it's, like just the direction, the movement and all that, because that would, to me, would be interesting to do. Now I'm not going to do that because they're not going to let me.
I'm about to say, you never know. We can float this Tress Way.
My days fielding punts are long over. But that's where it's like, can you do that? Because I just would be curious to see. It's just like in baseball, hitting a guy who throws 95 miles an hour. What does that look like? So,
yeah, I don't even want to be on the mound at a 95 mile per hour pitch. I'm scared of just going to batting practice.
Well, now it's funny because now, like, you go to a batting cage and 70 miles an hour looks like it's 100. But I think the fastest I ever faced was like 90 miles an hour, and
90.
Yeah. And I got a piece of it, man. I got a nice hard shot down the line, but it was just foul. And I think that was my glory. It's like, I got a piece.
But definitely consider the Tress Way punt competition. Maybe you.
I'm gonna say we could float it Tress Way's way.
That seems like a cool enough dude to do it.
Those days are done. It's just like, that's a curious thing, but like those days are done, because I would have felt much better if when you're closer to your, I would say this, when you were closer to your playing days doing it. Now, like, I don't know, like, your body kind of creaks when you run up to it and stuff. I don't know.
All right, man. Well, look, I'm not going to say that we will or will not float it Tress Way's way, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we cross that bridge.
There you go. All right, very good. All right, man.
All right, John. All right,
thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Down, set, hut, watch him throw the ball. We gon' pick it off. You gon' let him hit the hole or you gon' cut it off. You gon' play through fourth and long or you gon' punt it off. Your defenders, heavy hitters, put your pads in. Don't be looking for the ref to throw no flags in. Keep the helmet on, keep the cleats tight. You the type to want to win by any means, right? You should look alive. This is Trap or Dive.